Hello there folks, this is Ferengi on board again. Welcome to my YouTube channel, a place where I discuss different topics about spirituality, psychopathy, sociopathy, maybe, psychiatry. Very rarely I dive into these, and I'm actually intending to get a bit more into these. Well, the idea of sociology is something that's slightly on the rise in terms of interest, and it's something that I'll actually be um, exploring more in depth through the video game series that I want to create. Usually they will represent themselves as visual novels, but my account will have several of those videos regarding my game. And for those of you who still wonder what the state of my game is, it's doing good. It's actually better than before. The game theoretically and practically is finished, but I have to add several touches to it. And correct several of the things because I've done a lot of modifications, and now I have to make sure that everything is at the right place. And then I also have to test to see if the the lining of the events actually goes correctly and there's no interruption or something like that. And well, the purpose of my account is also to present a few times, from time to time, several of my gameplays, because I also like enjoying life, and a game or two from time to time never hurts. And well, what other things one may expect from my account is deep introspection and, well, psychology, psychiatry, just a bit of these. Usually introspection and answering different questions that people may find difficult, and I provide people with an interpretation. And I want to underline the fact that everything I provide is based on my own wisdom, my own knowledge, and everything I acquired, and any sources that I have come into contact with. Okay. Now, the purpose of this video is an indirect response to a question on Quora. I no longer found that question, but I know there are a lot of those. There are quite a lot of people that ask the question whether, through this video I'm gonna tackle a few ideas like, are psychopaths entirely fearless as they are said to be, or is fear actually something good or bad? Okay, now these things are some topics that can go very deep, and usually I prefer going very deep instead of just providing some surface answers. But at the same time, I'd rather provide things in such a way that would make people a bit more curious. Instead of just giving them some answers they might not even be fully aware of, or ready for accepting them. Okay, so with regards to psychiatry, okay, psychopathy is something that most people definitely don't understand, because psychopathy is not what most people expect. If you are expecting the typical psychopath to be that mask-wielding folk with a chainsaw in their hand, well, you're most likely not pointing at the right target. Okay, I'm not saying that psychopaths cannot do that, and of course through science it's been proven that usually psychopaths tend to be far less violent than others, but again there is also the lower functional psychopaths. Okay, so without getting into too many details, the idea of psychopathy is that it is a whole psychological and psychiatric spectrum. Okay, now as a spectrum, what a spectrum means is that it has a lot of structure in it. Okay, now you have, for example, your A-listers. Okay, that's how they are called, A-listers. Okay, which are your typical man or woman with a mask on their face and a chainsaw in their hand. Yes, those are most likely the most violent, but come again, out of this spectrum, that is a very select small number of possible psychopaths. Okay, that's not something necessarily to worry about. And fear is something that has kind of intrigued me, because I have seen posts on Quora and on so many sources stating that psychopaths are technically fearless. And well, some examples here say they feel grandiose, they lack remorse, they lack empathy. Now, okay, some of these things can actually be true to a certain extent, but what I feel about psychopathy, and nope, I'm not one, what I feel about that is more like a lack of awareness. Okay, they simply are somewhat less self-aware. Okay, they are probably aware of other things regarding them, but usually, especially when it comes to their emotions, they're not disconnected or they're not emotionless. Okay, it's just that emotions and that part of them simply doesn't play as much of a role as others. Technically, we can say that many of them are simply not too capable of reacting or overreacting to emotional stimuli. To a certain extent, I actually call this a good thing, because so many people do a lot of bad things in this world because they kind of overreact to their feelings. Okay, and most people end up doing all sorts of hideous things, like mass murders, torturing others, and even emotionally, not just physically. Okay, because having gone through a lot of so-called pain, they keep thinking of that pain. Okay, and the more they think of something, you amplify that idea. And let's not forget, there is something in science that says every time you think of something, okay, every time you think of something, you actually remember the last time you thought of it. Okay, you don't remember the original way. So every time you think of a story, right, that story is becoming more and more amplified. And if you don't have much control over your mind and or emotions, you're gonna make a big deal out of something that technically wasn't that much. Okay, we all have moments when we are angry, yes, but it is somewhat of a natural aspect of psychopathy to have somewhat, okay, like, note that I use a lot of somewhats because I cannot generalize. I can't call this a disease or something like that, but I simply cannot generalize. The moment you generalize something, especially if it is regarding life, that's when you're actually wrong, because life is not like a whole. Okay, life is not like everything is the same. Okay, when you have even psychopathic people, okay, they're not the same, even if their number is considered to be, I don't know, anywhere in between 1 to 2% or 5% of the population. But again, this is nothing else than a statistic. And let's not forget, statistics are generalized, because no one actually took the whole 8 billion people that we are on the planet and tested them to see whether they are psychopathic or not. Okay, they usually test a few thousand people and then they generalized based on that, on the results, right? They get some percentages, and most likely it's going to be generalized on the whole population, because the result is expected to be somewhat like that. Now, I'm not going to speak too much about psychopathy. Okay, fear is a response. Okay, fear is a response to different stimuli. Okay, now, as an acronym, fear stands for false evidence appearing real. Okay, so it's technically nothing else than okay, so it's a situation in which, well, you're triggered, okay, and you manifest something like that. Okay, you manifest this so-called fear. Now, you have to understand that fear exists in literally each and everything. Okay, fear has a vibration of around 100 hertz. Okay, and this fear is a natural reaction of the body, okay, of the physical body. Now, when you manifest fear, you have to understand that the reasons why you're manifesting fear is because of what I call ancient projections. Okay, so in the old times, okay, long ago, okay, when consciousness first breathed life in this planet, okay, and animals didn't know that much whom to eat or what to do, they instinctively felt some urges to do the so-called things. Okay, and that's how in time different beings started feasting upon other beings. Okay, and the idea of survival being the some of the lowest vibrations possible actually sprung to life, because consciousness begins from the lowest levels, and the lowest levels are that of shame, guilt, and, well, those are rather more complex, but usually survival is what strikes most animals, even bacteria, and like literally everything, because consciousness is everywhere, not just in humans. So in that time, okay, and as, let's say, life progressed, okay, and became more conscious, like, let's say, with mammals, okay, a lot of fear was pumped into what's called the collective consciousness, okay? And every time a certain feeling is manifested, your vibration is derived, okay? And at the same time, being connected more or less and being more or less aware, because the connection exists, but being somewhat aware or not of the collective consciousness that we are bound to, okay, we are linked with, okay. The point is that based on our vibration we also connect to different aspects from there. So when you manifest fear, okay, when your vibration is so low, you can actually realize that in your mind there are so many thoughts that simply pass through there, and you'll have so many even unfounded fears. Like you'll probably have a fear that your spouse will leave you but you're not even married, or you'll have a fear of, I don't know, a car crash, but you're probably not even having a driver's license. So based on this, you're technically doing nothing else than what is spiritually called as cleansing, okay. If you get those thoughts into your mind, you have to understand that you have to let them go, because reacting to them will most likely have you ignore them, and it's like you're gonna choke on them, because ignoring them puts them back and they're not gonna let you go. That is why you have so many thoughts in your mind that simply come back again and again and again. They're just like, you're like a troll warden, okay. Those thoughts are just prisoners in your mind and you have to let them go, but instead of letting them go, you say, okay, just stay a bit more in there, okay, and you close the cell door a bit more, and it's like, okay, like you close the prison doors again. It's like, no, go back in there, okay, like I know you should be free, but I'm gonna keep you there for more, okay, because that's what I want. And this lack of mental training and emotional training is what leads a lot of people to doing, to end up performing a lot of wrongdoing. Now, again, this is how society has been going for so long, and honestly it would be high time that people start opening their eyes and becoming a bit more aware of the impacts that their actions have, okay. So this being said, okay, I'm not gonna dive too much into this. I've got a video on the pendulum effect, or technically how things affect you directly and indirectly without you realizing, how environments actually help you, how connecting to certain ideas affects you, okay. Like fear is also something that can actually serve pretty well, okay. Now, even if you are aware or not of this fear, it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, okay. At least from a survival standpoint, okay, it does exist, it is there. You may not be truly aware, yes, okay, but it still exists within you. So your fear stems from these ancestral fears, okay. Like when you see a bear, what you experience is technically the fear of your ancestors that also saw the bear, and they felt naturally weak and defenseless against the bear, because one-on-one technically you don't have any chance. You cannot outrun the bear, you cannot outswim the bear. They can climb trees, and well, if you play dead, that's not gonna work, okay. So technically it's the fear of the ancestors that you're also purging, okay, while you're manifesting, because they've been having like billions of fears, and literally everyone who's here is helping at least a bit towards purging that. And considering how much fear there's on the planet, and fear having been the this prominent state of being for like, I don't know, millions of years maybe, imagine how much there is actually to be purged, okay. So the reason why you're feeling fear is because mostly you still have in your DNA a lot of the fear of your ancestors, okay, that has been passed down from generation to generation, okay. The DNA is much more complex than science has been saying. Most people say that and believe that DNA only keeps within it the last 7 generations, okay. That last 5, 6, 7 generations are the information that will allow in the development of your body, okay, because that previous 5, 6, 7 generations of information from your father is united with that of your mothers, okay, and then as these collide one against the other, one of these will reign supreme, okay, will reign dominant, and that is what will dictate how your body will look like. And all that information, by classes like eye color, skin color, pigmentation, like exact skin color, okay, and all sorts of these, let's call them parameters, like in programming, okay, these will simply be pitched one against the other, and your father's information will be pitched against your mother's information, and it will create pairs based on these specific features, okay. Each feature will be paired, and each one of them will be compared through, I don't know, the intelligence and the greater intelligence of the universe and Mother Nature. One of them will reign supreme, and you will end up as having some dominant qualities from your mother and your father, okay, because each gene, okay, each of these groups will have one of the genes reign supreme. Yes, these 5, 6, 7 generations before you are generations that will dictate how you look, but in separate parts of your DNA you have all your ancestral knowledge, okay. You have also dimensions beyond your physical one, okay, and you have also the so-called karma, which is basically the memory. This memory is also housing all the memory that's been before you up till you. So technically you carry the history of the universe from its creation up till your present. That is why true gurus will remind you that the truth has always been within you and is waiting for you to become introspective enough to see. Now, like as an example, you can think, for example, at yanderes, okay. Whoever is knowledgeable of the yandere genre, okay, from Japanese anime, the point about them is that they become obsessed with the emotions that they can finally feel around a certain person. They're not attached to the person, okay, they're attached to that emotion, but they think that they want that person because they think that as long as they have that person, they can also feel alive, because by manifesting emotions, you're actually feeling alive. And psychopathy, on the other hand, actually, is called to be an emotionless aspect of humanity. And I want people to understand that if you actually say that, you're kind of doing a wrong thing. You're doing psychopaths a disservice, okay. So not only that, but it shows that you don't know exactly what emotions are, okay. Emotion is nothing else than energy in motion. Every gesture that you make, every thought that you have, is manifesting at least a bit of emotion. It's like a shockwave that is propelling outwards from you, and that is why certain very sensitive people can actually feel your vibe, because they are very sensitive to all of your shockwaves that you emit, right? And this energy impregnates walls and objects and literally everything around. So in your house, you may actually experience that you feel certain thoughts in a certain part of your house and you don't manifest them, or you don't feel them in another part of your house. Is because in that specific part of your house you manifest them the most, and they've been sedimenting so much on the objects around that technically they're already influencing you every time you get in there. So is fear something good or bad? Well, let's take the genre of yanderes, okay. If someone would even speak, like as innocently as possible, would speak to their senpais, okay, as they are called, right, instantly they would feel feared, okay. A huge fear would strike them, because they suddenly feel that not understanding the idea of relationships that much, they will believe that if their senpai speaks to any other person, they might actually want to form a relationship and ditch them. That is why usually the endings with yanderes, it's kind of always sad, okay, because it kind of ends up in suicide and or at least murder of the so-called senpai, until they set up for another one, or most likely they also commit suicide as well. Such cases actually exist in real life, although psychiatry kind of ditches the idea of yanderes, although indeed it's kind of hard to accept that such a complex like aspect, like the yandere phenomenon would actually exist, okay, because the yandere suffers from a lot more. If you would take it into account, it's basically a spectrum of spectrums, because the yandere can suffer from, narcissism, because they may have a tendency to think that they are who they are, okay, but at the same time they hate themselves. So narcissism is a good point. Codependency, sociopathy, psychopathy, okay, there can be a lot of things. Now science kind of says that psychopathy can, like, as here, lacks empathy. Okay, now lack is misinterpreted by people, because lack doesn't mean a full absence of something. Lack means that you kind of have something, or at least a bit of something, but you consider, okay, that as not being enough. But if you are born a psychopath, okay, you have a completely different viewpoint of the world. So in a way you're self-sufficient in your very own way, okay. The other people will interpret them as being cold and remorseless and apathical, okay. They don't have much empathy because they don't feel necessary to manifest it, or they have been grown in an environment that didn't even allow that little empathy they had to develop, because empathy is something that everyone possesses, but the environment you live in can actually decide how much further it improves, because empathy is also a skill. You have a basic level, but it's something that you improve in life by socializing, okay. And one wrong aspect about psychopaths is that they cannot understand emotions, but quite on the contrary, emotions are what they actually feel to a certain extent, which kind of makes me wonder, like, are they actually empathic? Well, yes, they are, because they get to read people also by the idea of emotions. Now, to a certain mental level, okay, they might not understand why people would manifest like that, but you have to understand that the mind is super difficult to read, okay. Emotions and feelings are super easy to read, because once they settle in for a long time. Once you feel depression or something like that, it's not like you feel for like 5 seconds and it's done, okay. Like with the mind, it's actually the complete opposite. You're suddenly feeling cheerful, then you're listening to a song and you're feeling motivated, and whatever you're imagining, someone comes in and loads some junk on you, and then you feel like shit, and probably a few seconds later someone calls you and they crack a joke, and then you burst into laughter, okay. So you can, with the mind, you can manifest so many states in a so short period of time. But when you manifest a certain emotion or a certain feeling, that's definitely bound to stay for a while, okay. And usually positive ones stay for less, because society kind of teaches us and makes us very good at focusing only on the negative ones, okay. And if we have unbalanced mind and emotions, okay, you're easily gonna draw on the energies of others. So therefore you might feel like shit because everyone around you feels somewhat like shit, and you're technically inviting that into yourself. Now psychopathy, okay, if people would define it, although I kind of don't like bringing definitions, it would be most likely translated as a broken mind, okay, because psyche in Greek, in ancient Greek, means mind, okay. And you'll also have pathos, okay, or pathia, okay, which means disease, right? So technically it's a diseased mind or a broken mind, right, if you would take it. But on the other hand, I would rather see psychopathy as something completely different, because psyche indeed means mind, okay, but pathia can also mean communication, like telepathia, okay. It means communicating at a distance. So psychopaths can actually be very good mental communicators, because that's what they usually are, since their emotional side is more, it's not necessarily lacking, but in most situations it may not be their most representative part. Now of course most people will simply ditch the idea that psychopaths can actually have empathy, okay, like even sociopaths can be highly empathetic. Of course the chances according to science would be like really dim, and well, Science, as of my standpoint, I simply disregard it in many situations because I'm highly introspective and I find the answers that I need within me. Now, of course, I also seek not to generalize because what truths I find, they apply to me and to a certain limited number of people. Now, what science does is that it generalizes and people end up with false impressions. And this kind of reminds me of religion. Okay, religion generalizes a lot because there is only one god or one groups of gods that you have to follow, and literally everything else is kind of to be disregarded. Okay, so this is kind of bad because science kind of does the same thing, and if you don't trust what so-called science says, it's like, well, you're kind of a heretic. Okay, let me be a heretic and be introspective. Okay, but don't be surprised if I get to know a lot without reading too much. Okay, because, well, I'm discovering my own truths with the power of my introspection and with my communication with the universe. Now, also, I'm not some kind of super advanced reader as well, but come again, I really don't feel bad about this connection I've been knowledgeable of ever since I was quite young, because I knew I would get answers out of nowhere, and even if I would disregard them, I would later on, even after years, I would see some documentaries and then I would be like, hey, but I was thinking about this so many years ago. So psychopaths can actually, and usually, when you read someone, okay, and they as well, when you read someone, you read their vibe, okay, their emotion, because the emotion is what also influences your electromagnetic field, okay, which is your auric field. And when you speak to someone, usually you stand at a few meters away from them, so your auras actually overlap. So there's definitely an exchange of information. When you shake hands, for example, you always shake hands with your right hand. Okay, why you do that? Because the right hand's wrist is a connection to your subconscious mind. That is why some of those people who practice mind control, right, and they put people to sleep or they put people into certain trances, you may see that they actually, or may not always, but from time to time they may actually tap the wrist of the patient's right hand. Okay, it's like they just impose a direct subconscious message, and that's how they actually get a person to fall asleep with with them being conscious. Okay, I'm not calling this necessarily bad, but mentalism can actually be used in bad ways as well. Now, don't freak out also, okay? So, when you shake hands with your right hand, technically it's a much deeper connection in between your subconscious minds, and again there is another transfer that occurs. So while you speak to another person, even on the phone, when you speak, there's still a connection in between you. So as long as that connection exists, you're gonna have energy transfers, and that's why you might actually end up with feeling a certain vibe. It's like, there's something I don't like about that person, or there's actually something I like about that person, right? And of course vibes can actually be faked in a way. Yes, there's an advanced way of there are some advanced ways of doing that, or if people are not too aware, they can easily be fooled by a smile, because by being so little, by having such a little awareness of the situation, they simply disregard their emotional system, okay, their gut feelings, and literally their guidance system, which tells them, hey, don't do that. But again, people have to experience and learn in life. Now, are psychopaths truly fearless? Well, I simply cannot accept that, because psychopaths, okay, are still humans, and humans have a body, and the body has a brain, and the brain also has a part of it called the reptilian brain, which is the oldest part of it and which controls survival. So technically, even if the psychopathic brain is different in a few aspects, psychopaths are still humans, and they have like 99% of the features of other people. They have the same amount of vertebrae in their spine, they have the same amount of organs and like organ systems in their body, they kind of have the same amount of blood in them. So basically they're kind of the same thing. They also have a mind, they also think. Probably they're gonna think differently, and yes, they might have a broader limits, like for example when they crack some of their dark humor jokes, they might actually go as like much more in depth in that, for example, compared to most people who like literally break and they'll be like, oh, what the fuck, this person is weird. Okay, and just like any other person, probably not quite like any other person, but like some people, they might have a tendency to study the people around them a lot. Okay, so are they actually fearless? Well, the impact that fear has on them is based on their awareness. If something is and also their capacity to feel certain emotions, and most likely fear included, is also diminished, which can be somewhat bad in a way, but well, to their own extent, it's not necessarily something that can be bad. It depends per individual and whatever they would want to do. And well, let's think it like this: if they would feel that a certain situation would fear them a bit, and the fear is so little, okay, most likely they will disregard it. Okay, if the fear is huge, okay, namely they also take the logical aspects into account, and they feel that whatever they would want to do is cannot actually be achieved, most likely that fear will be greatly amplified. Okay, but the way their brain would work in relation to fear would be something like this. Okay, they most likely will become conscious of that fear, but most likely through their inner workings. Okay, they're not gonna they're not gonna allow that fear to counsel them. Okay, there was a great quote said by many highly successful people that said, I feel the fear, but I don't let it counsel me. Okay, I don't let it guide me, I don't let it rule me. Okay, now as a psychopath, most likely having this idea that they're much less capable of consciously accepting their fear. Okay, this can actually play good, and also it can play bad, because if you don't manifest your emotions, you're not gonna be too knowledgeable of those, and if you're not knowledgeable of those, okay, if you're not understanding of those, most likely you're gonna end up with a lot of confusion, because you might want to do something, but there is this weird thing in your mind that simply won't, like, it will bother you for a while, you're gonna ignore it, and most likely it will bother you again, and it can actually lead to some sort of paranoia in time. Okay, like over the course of a long time, because psychopaths are also capable of becoming paranoid. Sure, the percentage and the chances might scientifically be lower, but even if they are 1 in a million, it doesn't mean they cannot happen. Okay, like, let's actually take an event into account. Okay, in the world of civil aviation, okay, like passenger transporting, okay, and aircraft based passenger transportation. Okay, at a certain time until then, there has been noted a huge problem, okay, when it came to all aircrafts, and it was a problem that no one actually had a solution for. At the same time, it was tested again and again, and scientifically it was proven that even if the outcomes of such a problem would be catastrophical, okay, the problem had a 1 in a million chance to trigger. Okay, so most people simply disregarded that, and well, for so long literally nothing happened. But one flight suddenly went through this problem, and the plane actually crashed. Everyone died. The remains were found, and yes, it was proven that the plane went down because of this, like, 1 in a million chance. Right? They were unlucky enough to have that 1 in a million chance. Of course, changes were done, adjustments were done, adaptations were also undergone. So yes, but just because there is a very low chance, it doesn't mean it doesn't happen. Okay, even in video games, when you have those super low chances, like 3% chance to heal or whatever effect, it's still possible. So with psychopaths, especially with the lower functional ones who have, just as it says in here, poor behavioral controls, the lowest functional ones are more impulsive. okay, they might actually be a lot more tending towards narcissism, okay, and the feeling that they are who they are. It doesn't mean that psychopaths don't go through traumas, okay. They might, like any other child, they go to school as they grow, because psychopathy is something you're born with. But unfortunately, the emotional side of the brain takes almost, or I don't know if it takes that much, but it is said scientifically that the emotional component of the brain fully develops around your mid-20s. It could be 24, 25, 26 years, depending per individual. So up till then, technically, no brain scan can actually, point you out as a psychopath. However, the irony is that psychopathy is something that you are born with, okay? It's not a condition, it's not a disease that you take from others, okay? It's not a transmittable disease, it's not created by some kind of virus. It's just a state in which you are born with, okay? And to the conscious level of this 3D world, okay? Of this 3D consciousness that we live, you're technically not even the one who chose, okay? Like when you reach a certain age and you're aware of yourself, it's like, but I didn't choose to be a psychopath. Sure, you may have chosen that at higher levels of consciousness, but in here, in this planet, okay, you didn't get to choose your name, you didn't get to choose whether to be a psychopath or not, okay? Because a narcissist or a sociopath, they require a huge amount of trauma to actually reach that level, okay? And even psychopaths, they grow in a family, the family can be abusive, and psychopaths being somewhat different in behavior, being somewhat more cold, they can actually be born from natural parents, okay, like neurotypicals as they are called, okay, like non-psychopathic parents have a small chance of actually giving birth to a psychopathic child. There's nothing wrong with that, okay, so long as you raise the child in good condition. It doesn't mean that they will end up doing a lot of bad things, okay? There's like dozens of psychopaths in this world, and most of them don't do much. Just like this thing here says, and it's been quite surprising to me, that the number one job in the world that has the most possible psychopaths is that of a CEO, okay? Now, as of what I've heard, it is said that most psychopaths usually place a greater importance towards what can be called the purpose that they would fulfill in a group rather than on the group themselves. And yes, they might actually end up being somewhat controlling, they might actually have some grandiose behavior, but again, this kind of differs, because if you look at this aspect in here, okay, you see primary psychopathy, you have secondary psychopathy, okay, so you have different possible inflections, okay, like there can be some narcissism, there can be even some antisocial personality disorders, okay. So psychopathy is not something that you take alone, okay. If a person is indeed a psychopath and you definitely scan them and you have the confirmed result, okay, it's not that they have done something bad and people automatically call them psychopaths, okay. No, you have done the science, you have done the proof, and you have the proof, and okay, that person indeed is psychopathic, okay. We also have to understand that most of the things about psychopathy are discussed, and most of the let's say social experiments or interviews have been done in most of the situations with the lower functional sociopaths or psychopaths or even neurotypicals, okay, that end up in jail, because so many people that go in there are not necessarily psychiatrists, okay, they are just science people, and like most people, they may be biased by the fact that if you have committed a murder, you're automatically a psychopath, okay. And most people have a passion towards psychopaths because, well, why not? Like, they have this feeling that they have all their pains, and their pains guide them towards something like, well, I've been made to suffer, so to a certain extent I feel entitled to make other people suffer, okay. And there are a lot of movies and tropes in which there are these killers in deep forests that kill a lot of people and they're not caught, and to a certain extent people would definitely fantasize about that thing, okay. There's also fantasies that revolve around autoassasinophilia, or fantasizing about being killed during sexual intercourse, okay. This usually stems from a low level of self-esteem, which kind of society excels at drowning us in. Okay, there's very few things that could uh, technically like literally help us improve our self-esteem. Okay, so regarding psychopathy, this is something very complex that would require me hours on end to speak about, and that's not something that I really feel like. What I want to point out is that psychopaths are just somewhat less aware of their own fear. Okay, that is why they may be so charming. Okay, because in the end, technically, they are who they are. Okay, and they have somewhat of a more natural tendency to be authentic. Okay, and this is something that I've discussed in other of my videos. You can click on my account and see some of them, and you will see that, for example, narcissists are the best teachers in the world. Most people call them liars and cheaters, but technically narcissists are the most authentic people. Yes, indeed, it might sound very surprising, but the fact is this. Okay, narcissists, indeed, they lie, they cheat, they feel grandiose, they are deceitful. On the contrary, they don't lack empathy. They are quite highly empathic because they can feel your their empathy is more like tending towards the lower vibes. Okay, when you feel pain and the such, because that's what they themselves feel, and that's what they can actually feel in others. Okay, so they feel that they have to put you to more of that because they are entitled to make everyone suffer, right? And they can actually feel those emotions within you, because emotion is nothing else than a reaction to a certain state. Okay, they make you feel bad, and using some sort of logical responses in your mind, you suddenly create that pain. That pain is nothing else than a reminder, hey, you're in a situation that sucks. Okay, get out of there. But again, school, parents, your friends, no one teaches you how to take your feelings and emotions into account, and that actually favors narcissists. But at the same time, from a spiritual standpoint, it's very good, because it is what helps people learn and gain a lot of spiritual wisdom that will help them in any further lives they will go through, because that's how you gain self-love. Narcissists teach you what it is like to live life outside of self-love, because they hate themselves, they hate who they are, they simply are the lowest vibration possible. Shame, guilt, fear, you name it, they have it. Okay, but technically narcissists manifest the way they are because they are authentic. That is who and what they are in their complexity. Okay, they are liars, they are cheaters, but that's what they authentically are. That's how their code works. Okay, now you as a non-narcissist, okay, when you are lying, you're not authentic because you're technically not speaking your truth. Okay, they are actually speaking their truth, even if in the most situations the truth will almost always be taught in reverse, because the truth has to be experienced and realized, not taught. If you want to teach the truth, that kind of makes you a tyrant, because that's kind of what religion and science do. They teach you certain things, and if you don't listen to that, you're kind of a heretic. Okay, the thing with the truth is that until you or any other person experiences it and realizes it, there's not gonna be anything else, because hey, your situation is gonna simply suck. Okay, indeed it's gonna suck, because until you realize your awareness is low, okay, you're gonna suffer. So increasing your awareness will simply allow you to become more and more authentic. Okay, and authenticity is also a level of self-awareness. Okay, the more self-aware you become, the more authentic you also become. And that is why narcissists suffer a lot, because they are fully aware of their pains. And that is why also psychopaths are what they are, because they are quite self-aware of who and what they are. They may not be fully aware of their fears and their emotions, but they are aware of who they are and what they are to a certain extent. Okay, lower functional psychopaths may not have that much of an accent on this. Usually not being able to control their impulses will kind of have them end up on the wrong side of the law, so most likely you will see them in prisons and such. So is fear actually something good or bad? Well, you're probably gonna listen to a huge amount of people that will tell you fear is bad because you're at a lower vibration, but fear is nothing else than a part of you. So unless you accept it, you're gonna run away from something that is wounded. Okay, the reason why you feel fear within you outside of the normal instinctive fear is that there is an aspect of you that you haven't healed. Okay, and well, psychopaths may not be aware of this, so most likely they won't bother healing that, as I kind of cannot accept the fact that psychopaths cannot be spiritual. That's probably something that may not draw their interest, but I doubt they can simply not be at least a bit spiritual. Okay, so what I want to say is, fear, you will hear a lot of people that will tell you that fear is bad. Okay, I'm the kind of person that comes with a neutral standpoint, and my purpose in life, one of them, is to remind people that there's always another way. Okay, that you can feel and or interpret things. Okay, but be careful when you give meaning to things, because that can actually become part of who you are, and you're gonna suffer a lot because the meaning that you give may not be truthful in the end. So the point about fear is actually, it is something good, but in the end there is no such thing as good or bad. Okay, good or bad are just meanings that you give, and meanings end up in creation of stories. Okay, technically you're going a bit psychiatric. Okay, you're inventing some stuff and you agree to that stuff, and you're gonna suffer because you're running away from authenticity. So long as you accept stories that you've made up and you're constantly feeding again and again, you're gonna end up on the suffering part of the spectrum. Okay, because as long as you're not authentic, suffering is ensured. Okay, not because I want it, but because this is how the universe works. Okay, to a certain extent. It doesn't mean that psychopaths don't suffer. Okay, they also have friend losses. Okay, they most likely they have better boundaries when it comes to people, but it doesn't mean that they don't lose friends. It doesn't mean that they don't suffer in their own world. Okay, so empathy is something that they actually have, because they can actually read people, because being the awkward one, they are just like those highly empathic people who are waking up. They are always the black sheep of the family. They are always the awkward ones, right? So they will end up keeping a distance or being distanced by others, so they will end up reading people from afar, and this is again a skill that you can actually improve in time. And probably they may not be aware how they actually get to read people so well, but again, it doesn't matter how you do a certain thing if your results are correct. Okay, because the subconscious mind will always and constantly work. Now, with regards to fear, okay, is fear something bad? Well, I would say that it is also good, but it depends on what meaning you want to give it, and I would say the most it matters is what you're gonna do. So for example, if you're at war, okay, if you're on the battlefront, fear is actually something good, because it reminds you that you're alive, and it is gonna be that thing which will prevent you from going like brainlessly charge up front and like uselessly die. Okay, fear is also something that reminds you of a lot of things. Okay, it reminds you, hey, don't put your hand in that machine because it's gonna end up being cut. Don't do that thing because that's gonna happen. Okay, so fear is a very powerful emotion that is nothing else than a guide. Okay, it's also a guide. Okay, now from a psychopathic standpoint, let's presume that they actually don't have fear. Okay, is their having no fear actually a good thing? And again, the majority of people will say yes, it's a good thing to not have fear, because they're biased by the fact that fear is bad. They've constantly been feeding this story within them that fear is bad, and they always have attached it to the meaning of any bad experience that they've had. Okay, so as a psychopath, it's not a good thing to actually lack fear, because let's face it, most psychopaths don't necessarily know that they are psychopaths, because let's face it, when you are born, okay, you are who you are. Okay, like let's say a daltonist, okay, is a person who sees green instead of red and red instead of green. Okay, but they are who they are. Okay, because from their perspective standpoint, okay, they see green, it's green, okay, it's correct, right? If they see it as green, it is correct. If you take 1,000 people and show them the same thing, they won't see the same exact color. They will see variations of that color, and yes, they will say, okay, it's brown, or it's black, or it's red, or it's green, or it's white, or it's whatever color you want, or non-color. So the question is, okay, it's like, it has that nuance, okay, but some people see better, some people don't, okay. So taking these things into account, they kind of end up as having their own opinion, okay, like, this is definitely green because I see it though. Then they find themselves in a world that says, hey, that is not green, and everyone around them says, hey, that is not green, that is actually red. And you know, it's like, it's gonna be really confusing, because perceiving those things from your standpoint is gonna be against your own nature, okay, because you didn't choose necessarily that, and it's not your fault, right? It's not about victimizing or placing a fault in here. Like, any people who do that are definitely moronic, okay, but that is the point, okay. You're perceiving things from your own standpoint, okay, just like psychopaths, okay. They might be, for even their whole life, they may not be aware of who and what they are, okay, just because other people have, you know, a classification for them, okay, that might not actually get to be in their, you know, in their book, okay. They might not even know that they are one. And okay, let's actually go to this spectrum, okay, to the side of the psychopaths in this world that actually know they are, okay. They have gone to the medic, they have done the test, and the results say, okay, you have a psychopathic brain. People say that, you know, psychopaths are born so and they can never change. Well, this is something as bad as possible, because there is something that quantum physics has said, and the ancient civilizations also supported, and you know, it is called, I think, neuroplasticity. I'm not sure about the concept, but you know, I also have concept aversion. I kind of don't like getting attached to words and their meanings, because I'd rather be a free being. I only use words and meanings to try to make myself understood. At the same time, you have this idea that, okay, the brain, for so long we have been believing that you are born with a certain number of neurons, they never reproduce, but they actually reproduce. New neurons are born while you are asleep, and even more are born when you sleep at the right times. And well, you should start reading a bit about what's called a chronotype, or technically the times of the day that different people need to take into account for rest, because it doesn't matter if you sleep 12 hours but you don't sleep them at the right time. If you sleep 1 hour at the right time, that's gonna be far better than even 12 hours of sleep, okay. So the point about this is that if you are aware of yourself, okay, of being a psychopath, that's not necessarily the best thing ever, because there are so many people nowadays fantasizing about why not killing all the psychopaths in the world. Well, I believe, and I would actually turn this into a, you know, like a social teaching, okay, like a highly social teaching, and even in the constitution of any map of any country, it doesn't matter what your aspects are, so long as you're not disturbing others, okay. Like, I definitely make some specific regulations in constitutions against narcissistic abuse, okay, and any sort of abuse, okay. So long as you're a narcissist, a sociopath, or a psychopath, okay, I really don't care about that, because, well, I really can't care about that, okay. Society doesn't care about anyone. But if you're doing troubles, okay, if you're aggressing other people, well, that's when trouble should also exist on your side, okay. But nowadays there are a lot of people that fantasize about why not killing all the psychopaths. So if you become aware that you are a psychopath, guess what, you're suddenly aware that you have this magical arrow pointing on your head, and you know, keeping that kind of becomes a highly valuable secret, okay, that most likely you wouldn't want to tell anyone, because you don't know if you can actually trust them to keep the secret. And if a psychopath actually tells you that they are, and well, you can actually confide in them that they are, and probably they also show you the proof, then that's nothing else than a proof of their utmost trust in you. And it's preferable not to break that trust, because well, psychopaths won't necessarily run vengeance on you, but most likely they will ignore you for good, and they're not gonna re-invite you in their life. That is why psychopaths are usually a very powerful, probably the most powerful counter to narcissists, because once they ignore you, they're just gonna naturally make sure that you're not gonna get back into their life anytime soon throughout this whole existence. Okay, some might re-invite you in their life because suddenly they might have a need for you, and psychopaths can also be grandiose, and they can also be deceitful, yes, but let's not generalize. Okay, people and even psychopaths are very, they're very different, just like neurotypicals are. Okay, not all neurotypicals are the same. So suddenly you're faced with a big problem as a psychopath, because there are so many people who would fantasize, how about we actually kill psychopaths, because those people have been traumatized just like psychopaths have been, most likely through parental abuse, school abuse, bullying, and all sorts of things. And usually neurotypicals and highly emotionally compatible people will end up thinking, well, I've been abused, I'm entitled to abusing others. Okay, so why not actually kill the abusers, right? This is not a bad mentality, it's actually a natural mentality, because this is how the brain works. The brain works on the principle of, if I have a problem, I have to simply exterminate the problem. Okay, and well, that's kind of how the truth works. Most people think this is something satanic because there is a thing in their creed, okay, that says if something bothers you, warn it to no longer do it, and if they still do that, destroy them. I really don't take this into account that much, okay, because Satanism, or what people call it nowadays, is again nothing else than a belief system. I'm not gonna dive into this because I'm not gonna judge other people's beliefs and religions, and whatever shapes them, whatever they feel great about them, it's their point. Okay, they are free to believe in whatever they want. I'm not here to judge and say that religion is bad. Okay, there are ways to experience life beyond the point of a religion or a religious belief, but if people want to experience from that standpoint, well, I don't have any problem with that. So for a psychopath, actually, this fear, I would bet that this fear actually exists, because being also probably they can tend to be a bit paranoia, because they can also have trust issues. Okay, like they naturally don't trust people too much, and becoming so aware, especially as a highly functional psychopath, that there are so many people that would gladly cause you harm just because you're something you didn't even choose to be, well, that's going to induce definitely some fear, probably a bit of paranoia as well. At the same time, well, the point that I started about the brain and quantum physics, okay, and ancient civilizations actually supported that, is that our thoughts actually shape our brain. Okay, so if you theoretically, if you think enough, and don't know if meditation is required, but if you think enough about becoming psychopathic, you can actually wire your brain in such a way that it ends up as being a psychopathic brain. Now the question is, your brain is so well adjusted to who and what you are, to what you have accepted. So if you do this, it is actually possible. Okay, technically and even scientifically, it's been proven that you can actually shape the way your brain works. Okay, and most likely I agree that you can actually shape your brain from a psychopathic brain to a less psychopathic one, or even a neurotypical one, and vice versa. But the point is, this is gonna be something that you're gonna be met with a lot of resistance, because once you come into a body, you have a lot of information, you have a lot of memory that supports who and what you are. Okay, and for the entirety of that life, it's gonna be hard to ditch that of what you are. Okay, so technically it's not gonna be too easy, or it's gonna be impossible to become a non-psychopath if you are one, or become a psychopath if you're not one, by rewiring your brain and playing with this, because you have that memory that will simply prevent you from doing that. And you can actually end up wiring your brain in very awkward ways, and you can actually cause more harm. So honestly, I wouldn't suggest trying anything like the such. Okay, this is not something with road signs that it will, like, it's not like a guided meditation. Okay, in order to become a psychopath, do this, do that, follow this route, follow that route. Okay, so you can actually end up, like, screwing yourself, and most likely irreversibly. So I wouldn't encourage people to use quantum physics and meditation and introspective means to rewire their brain into something as advanced as a full psychological and psychiatrical spectrum. Okay, you'd better rewire your mind to accept, to ditch some of the old beliefs that are no longer serving you and accept better ones. Okay, well, hopefully you've liked this type of video. I know I've talked a lot, but I wanted to present a very strong point on psychopaths. The point is, many of them feel fear, many of them also feel it, but they may not be aware of that. Nothing in this world can be generalized, especially if you are taking into account the ideas and possibilities of life itself, because life itself cannot be generalized. The moment you generalize life, you've kind of have lost the contact with it. Okay, that's a very simple thing to do. Okay, a very simple-minded thing to do, and it shows a lot of shallowness. You don't like going deep into things and understanding them. You just rush conclusions, and usually the first conclusions are also not necessarily good. And it also besides the idea of shallowness, it shows that you have a very small awareness. You lack a certain level of competence probably, but also you lack the knowledge and awareness over yourself and others. Okay, now all this being said, hopefully you like the type of content that I'm creating. Feel free to like and subscribe if you do. Feel free to share these ideas. Also feel free to point people towards my account, and together we can actually help raise the awareness of people. Share this with your friends. Wisdom is something that is best when it is shared. Okay, so all this being said, you are loved and appreciated. Take care of yourselves. Do the work that you're doing. Whatever you're doing is the best you can at the right pace for you. And well, just as usual, take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones. You are loved and appreciated. You are supported in whatever you are doing. Ferenc on board, signing out.